If you cannot respond, then you can just type your response in the chat. Yeah, okay. Good morning and welcome to this second session. And this session is aptly titled ISO certification, how to survive the audit. Now, in this training session, we are going to look into what are the types of the audits as far as ISO certification is concerned. Now, this certification could be for any standard, for example, ISO 9001 quality management system, ISO 45001 occupational health and safety management system, or ISO 14001 that is environmental management system, or ISO 27001 information security management system, so on and so forth. Probably there are more than 20 plus ISO management system standards. Now, as you know that the certification audits are conducted by third-party certification body. For example, your certification audit has been conducted by a certification body. The name of the certification body is Inspect International. It is based in Turkey. So you will see that probably on your website, on your corporate material and presentations, you use the logo of the company who has certified to ISO 9001 and ISO 45001. So basically, there are many types of certification audit. The first is the what we call as an initial certification audit. Now, what is an initial certification audit? That means the company has prepared themselves. They have implemented the system. They have trained their people. They have conducted. They have made sure that all the processes are in place. In order to make sure they have conducted the internal audit and then the management review. So fairly they are confident that now they can meet the certification requirement. So in that case, what they do is that they invite the certification body. Now the certification body, that is the very first time the company goes for the ISO certification. So that is called an initial certification audit. I would like to repeat, initial certification audit. Now, initial certification audit is divided into two stages. We call it stage one audit and stage two audit. Now, stage one audit, the objectives of the stage one audit are to assess your documented management system. That means the certification body would like to assess that yes, this particular client of ours or the company would like to go for the certification, but do they have the documented management system and what kind of documented system they have or what kind of the software automation they have instead of a documented management system. They would like to evaluate the location or any site specific conditions. For example, there are many locations which are not easily accessible, or there are locations where there could be some other issues, or there could be some site specific conditions. For example, the transportation is not available, or in that particular area, maybe some sort of a events are going on or festivities are going on. So when you have this rush kind of environment, probably would like to avoid those locations. So evaluate the locations in the sense that when the company claims that we have so many locations under the certification, then the auditor would like to ascertain the locations, the actual physical locations are there. There are two types of locations. We have physical locations and the remote locations. So these days, after the pandemic, most of us, we have learned to work remotely. That means we work from home or we work from, in a hybrid fashion. That means maybe half the time we work from home or from the office, and then the information and data is stored in the cloud. So basically, a remote location are those locations where you have the cloud storage. So that the auditor would like to check. And then the when the auditor starts with the stage one audit, he would like to just check whether the core team members or the steering committee members. Now you are the steering committee members. Most of you have undergone very detailed training as far as both the standards are concerned. Uh, as I pointed out last year, almost for 3 months, we had gone through the training. So the auditor would like to assess whether if you understand the requirement of the standard, and after that, also auditor would like to ascertain the scope of the documented management system, the processes, the locations, and related statutory and regulatory requirements and associated risk. So here, the scope of the certification is very important. So there is, for example, CPL. You have many divisions. You have pharmacy division. You have uh, you have a hardware house division. You have can you name me the divisions? What you have? I think you have the supermarket division, isn't it? Yes, no, maybe. How many divisions you have? Or how many verticals you have? All right. So the pharmacy, hardware house, supermarket. Probably under the supermarket, you have the coffee houses, right? So it is not necessary that all the verticals of the business are brought under the certification. So, for example, the pharmacy division is totally different from the hardware division. I mean, the certain processes are the common. Uh, Certain processes are common, but the core processes would differ. I mean, core processes for pharmacy division are different, and for the hardware house are different, and for the supermarket they are different, or the coffee house they are the different. So it is not necessary that you take all the processes, all the verticals, all the locations within the scope of the certification, and the related, as we know, the legal requirement or a statutory and regulatory requirement. So pharmacy business, we know it is highly regulated business. So there'll be more regulations to follow as far as the pharmacy is concerned. Equally, supermarket is also regulated in terms of food safety. So these are the some of the these are the some of the the statutory and regulatory requirements. For example, you will have the health and safety requirements for all the workplaces. So these are the statutory and regulatory requirements and associated risk need to be considered. And then the auditor would like to plan for stage two audit and establish the planning arrangements for how you have done your internal audits and management reviews. So stage two audit is actually you have to understand the stage one audit is to make sure that you have specific internal controls in place. Whereas stage two audit is to make sure that these controls are being implemented effectively for a period of time. All right. So stage one audit is to ascertain the auditor is going to check whether you have documented management system and processes. That means you have the internal controls are well designed and they are in the place. And that is how the auditor comes to the conclusion whether the company is ready for the stage two audit. That means the to auditor to ascertain whether the internal controls are effective or not. And uh, in case the auditor finds that there are areas of potential improvement as far as any documented management systems are concerned, because you develop this documented management system or you develop the process automation based on the requirement of the standard. So in case any particular requirement of the standard you have not addressed in your documented management system, then auditor is going to be point out to you, and that becomes your area of potential improvement. So that becomes a stage one audit. So stage one audit is where the auditor would like to come and see whether you have the internal controls in place, and those internal controls are as per the requirement of the standard. So that is about the stage one audit. Now let's come to the stage two audit. Now, basically, if you talk about stage two audit or re-audits or transfer of re-audits, that means, you would like to transfer from one certification body to another certification body. The process is the same. Now, stage two audit is basically to evaluate the implementation and effectiveness of your management system. That means your internal controls, and to assess your performance against your key performance indicators or objectives. So here, the auditor would like to see that you have the internal controls, the system in place. You have identified the targets, the key performance indicators for all the departments under the scope, all the processes under the scope, all the people under the scope, and whether you are monitoring their performance or not. The auditor also would like to evaluate the statutory and legal compliance, the operational controls. So as we have the operational processes. We call them core processes, and we have the support processes. So support processes are basically finance and accounts, the administration, human resources, technology support, facility management. These are the support processes, and operational processes are basically your core processes. So if it's a pharmacy, then your operational process would be your logistics, inbound logistics, and the stores management, and the dispensation of the medicines. And would like to see what are the internal audits, how internal audits are conducted, and how do you conduct your management review, and whether if you bring in all the inputs required for the management review, and the result of the management review is to action to implement the improvements and resource identification. So the auditor, again, I would like to point out, would like to check whether your internal controls you have implemented well and they are effective. Uh, the auditor is also going to evaluate the link between the normative requirements, I mean the requirements of the standard, the policies, the performance objectives, the targets, and the responsibilities, competence of people, operations, your procedures, and the performance data. By the way, can anyone tell what is the difference between policy, process, and procedures? Anybody? Policy, policy, policy. What is a policy? You can either give your response in the chat, or you can speak, no problem. Yes, a course or principle of action, a policy principle action, yes. Set of rules to follow from the top management. Principle adopted or proposed by an organization comes from the governing body or the top management. That's correct. So, that's about the policy. Processes we have already seen in the last presentation, and the procedures, again, the step-by-step approach. So you write down the procedure, what exactly. So normally you would like to write down in detail 5 Ws and 3H, what you are going to do, why you are going to do, when you are going to do, where you are going to do, who's going to do it, how you are going to do, how much you are going to do, and how do you know that whatever you're supposed to do, you have done that. So that's the difference. So that is what the stage two audit, again, I would like to repeat myself. The auditor is going to check the standards requirements, going to check your policies, processes, procedures, about your performance objectives and indicators, the responsibility, authorities and responsibilities, the competence of people, your operational processes, your support processes, performance data, and would like to identify the potential improvement for the management system. So we need to distinguish between the stage two audit and stage one audit and stage two audit. Stage one audit is to establish whether the internal controls as per the standards are in place or not. Stage two audit is to evaluate whether the internal controls have been implemented and effective are over the period of time. All right. So is the distinction between the stage one and stage two audit is clear to you? Yes, no, maybe. The distinction between stage one audit and stage two audit, is it clear to you? All right. Now let's move on. Now, this time, CPL is due for the first surveillance audit. So that means you have last year you have gone through the stage one audit and stage two audit, and the result of the stage two audit is that your company has been certified to ISO 9001 and ISO 45001 standard. Now this year is going to be the surveillance audit. Now, what is the surveillance audit? Surveillance audit is basically it's not the full-fledged audit in the sense that the certification is not going to again carry out the stage one audit because you have already established that you have the internal controls in place. Now, in the surveillance audit, the auditor would like to check that over the period of time, that means 1 year, whether you continue to fulfill the requirements of the standard. So whether you continue to implement the internal controls and the effectiveness of those internal controls. The auditor would like to check whether you have conducted your internal audit as per the plan. You have conducted your management reviews, and if you have identified, in case you have identified any non-conformities during the audit, either it could be internal audit or the external audit, then those non-conformities have been addressed. The auditor would like to handle the complaints from your internal customers and external customers and how the complaints been resolved, would like to evaluate the effectiveness of the management system with regards to your key performance indicators, would like to evaluate your statutory and regulatory compliance and the performance of the system. Would like to evaluate the progress of the planned activities aimed at continual improvement. So it is not about you are maintaining the status quo, it is about the continual improvement. So auditor would like to specifically see that how you have improved upon the last year, what you have done. So auditor normally get very disappointed that if you are not been able to show any the continual improvement projects. So auditor expects you to identify the continual improvement projects and bring those projects into the effect. Also, the internal controls with respect to your core processes, your operational processes, your support processes, that auditor need to see. And if there are any changes in your organization, changes in terms of people, changes in terms of processes, changes in terms of machines, changes in terms of the way you operate your business. So there is a possibility that over the period, I mean, 1 year is quite a long period in that sense that there is an attrition rate. So people leave company, new people join company. So as and when there are changes to the people, process, and technology. So whenever there are changes to people, process, and technology, those changes needs to be considered, and accordingly how you have tuned your internal controls or a documented management system that auditor would like to see. The auditor also would like to check the certification body and accreditation body symbols. or the marks. So when you get certified, you very proudly and happily display the accreditation body and certification body logos or the symbols or the marks stating that your company has been certified to ISO 9001 and ISO 45001. So the auditor would like to check, auditor would like to see that there is no misuse of the symbols and logos. And of course, as I've said earlier, that auditor would be specifically interested in the areas of potential improvement of your management system or the internal controls. So this time it's going to be your surveillance audit. So surveillance audit, now these are going to be the requirements from the auditor's point of view. Now, so before we go on to how do we prepare for the surveillance audit. Is the purpose of the surveillance audit clear to you? Yes, no, maybe? All right. So now let's move on. How do we prepare for the surveillance audit or for any audit for that sense? So for example, we have to revisit the context of the organization. So if you look at this particular diagram, so in this diagram, if you see that, it starts from the top. It starts from the top in the sense, of course, it starts from the governing body and the top management. It also starts from the strategic planning. Then from strategic, it comes to the tactical planning, and from the tactical planning, it comes to the operational planning. So you need to see what is the context of your organization, that is the business environment. So, in the last session, we have seen what is the business environment. We have to see what are the internal factors and what are the external factors. The external factors would be your pestle, political, economical, social, and technological. The internal issues, related to the people, processes, technology, your culture, and how these issues are going to affect the performance of your organization. You will have to visit your mission, vision, and the policies. You'll have to see who are your stakeholders, who are your interested parties, and what are their expectations. So, your business operating system, we call it BOSS. So BOSS process sets the. So with this, when you have the environmental scanning, you have mission, vision, and policies. You have the stakeholder analysis. With this, you come to your the organizational goals and objectives, which includes, it can be for quality, it can be for environment, it could be for health and safety, it could be for information security, it could be for food safety, so anything. So having done the environmental scanning, you will set your goals and objectives. So those are goals and objectives are about the intended results. And from the goals and objectives, you have key performance indicators for your various processes or various departments, and then you run the processes. So if then you have the key processes, and for every key process, probably you can have a single or you can have a multiple process key performance indicators. And while you set the process indicators, key performance indicators, you would like to identify the risk and opportunities. So you do the risk analysis, and all this while you put in place all your internal controls, you move towards the improvement action. So that's a continual improvement. So this is how you start preparing for your surveillance audit. Now let's get into process. Again and again we are repeating this concept because it's very important for us that we drill down into our system, what is expected of the standard. So again, we need to describe the processes. We need to identify the process owners. So we have already done that. So either we have the internal controls, or we have the documented system, or we have the process automation. So you have the ERP. So Someone please switch off your microphone because I'm getting echo. Yeah, please. Thank you. So process. So every process, as we know that every process has got certain inputs, and those inputs are we call 5 M's. So we have manpower, material, machines, money, methods, and then the process are these certain transformational activities. So we conduct those transformational activities, and then we have the process output. So we need to see. So we start with describing the process. So when the auditor conducts the audit, auditor would like to check your understanding of the process approach. So auditor might ask you, okay, you describe your process. So how do you carry on this process? Then he would like to ask you, what are your process inputs? What are your process outputs? So then what kind of equipments and facilities and materials you use? With whom? I mean, who are the other people? Who are the other agencies? Who are the other process owners with whom you coordinate or you communicate? The auditor would like to see how it is done, and any particular procedures or any standard operating procedures or work instructions you follow. Any forms you fill. Now those forms can be the paper forms, or those forms can be the system forms or the online forms or on the ERP forms. And finally, for that particular process, what are your metrics and what are your quality objectives? So always remember that, I mean, auditor is not more interested in seeing your documentation. He would like to check your understanding of the process approach. So how do you carry on your process? That is more important. Remember that ISO standards do not specifically require you to document everything. They would like to see that the people are competent and people understand the process approach, people understand the system approach. So again, you revisit the process approach, and then when you go back to your work after this training, you just sit down and then just reflect, and try to bring in. This diagram is, by the way, called the turtle diagram. So it looks like a turtle. So just bring in this turtle diagram in front of your eyes, and then try to visualize, what are your process inputs, what are your process outputs, what kind of facilities, equipments, material you use, with whom you coordinate, how do you do it, what are the forms and records you keep, and what are your performance indicators. The next thing what you need to check out is your risk management process. So for every process, we need to identify the risk and opportunity. So risk, I mean, risk is not all the time, we are in the business or we are achieving our targets because we not only manage our risk, but we also manage our opportunities. We have to also understand that we have, every risk brings certain opportunities to us. So we need to identify the risk. Now, those risk could be the operational risk. This risk could be financial risk. You check any process, any department, there has to be a risk identification. So, last time, if you see, we have spent maybe a couple of sessions on the risk management, risk analysis, risk assessment. So you need to understand what is the risk capacity, what is your risk appetite, what is the risk tolerance level, and then what are the risks you are identifying, and what is your risk mitigation responses. Those could be, it could be avoid, or it could be transfer, it could be mitigate, whatever you would like to do with that particular risk, so that the impact of the risk is significantly reduced. Of course, then you still have the residual risk. Now in hardware house, we, apart from doing a business risk, we also have done the what we call as occupational health and safety risk. So we have done the job risk analysis, JRA. So job risk analysis from the point of health and safety. So it is not only for the people working in the hardware house, department or the stores, but also for the customers who walk in. So, ensuring that the health and safety precautions are properly taken, and beforehand we know what could be the occupational health and risk for the walk-in customers or while delivering the product and services. I don't say that there won't be any occupational health as far as the pharmacy division is concerned. There are certain risks, For example, um, I mean, there are the racks at the height, and probably you are going to use the heighted stool, or you're going to use a ladder to reach to the rack which is on the height, and that could pose a risk to you. So you need to identify. So you need to identify your the finance and accounts. Of course, the finance and accounts is not part of ISO 9000. So auditor is not going to ask, but then since you have the internal control department, internal audit department, probably I mean you can look into that matter. That is an not from the point of ISO, but from the point of having the robust internal controls in place. I'm just recommending it to you. Then you have the operational risk, and then you have the occupational health. So in operational risk, you will have risk related to your logistics, risk related to your purchasing, risk related to your human resources, risk related to your facility management, risk related to your technology department. So in case if your server is down, you're not going to be able to serve your customers, because if the server is down, your ERP system will not work. So all those factors you need to take into consideration, and risk management process should be in place. So auditor typically would like to see your risk register. So I would like to ask your internal audit department. I believe there are certain participants from your internal audit department. Do you maintain updated risk register? Yes, no, maybe. That's good. So, you know, uh, yes, the auditor would like to check your risk register. Auditor would like to check that, how you have arrived at particular risk. What is the risk tolerance? Uh, how do you mitigate that particular risk? And what is the residual risk? So all those factors are important. So that is about the risk management. All right. So, I mean, I would like to revisit here. So, for example, we have to do risk analysis for the hardware house. So hardware house is that here we typically identify the top safety risks scenarios. So we need to identify what are the safety risks as far as the hardware house is concerned. Then we need to identify the initiating causes or the threats. I mean, why do we have those risks? I mean, what are the factors which will cause those risks? We need to identify the barriers for prevention and mitigation. So here we identify the barriers. As we know, there are different kind of controls. We'll come to it: detective controls, preventive controls, and so forth. So, for example, if we are using the video cameras, the surveillance cameras in and around our stores, then probably would like to review the potential use of the video analytics. So, we would like to check the video. We would like to see, I mean, people normally I've seen that if you have the video surveillance, then it goes to the security department, and security probably you will have the security operations center, and there'll be multiple monitors, and there'll be a security officer who would be monitoring this. But probably he's just monitoring for the any unexpected event or the intruder. But we can use the video analytics to identify the health and safety risk. So whether we can do that. And with the help of video analytics, we would like to track the violations or deviations, in terms of people, in terms of processes, in terms of equipment, in terms of material, in terms of traffic, or in terms of any external factors, which could be rains or which could be cyclones or any severe the environmental conditions. And then we'll have to plan what are the intervention plans. So here we have to design the alerts or the intervention plan. We have to decide the what kind of camera we require, where we are going to position the camera. We need to evaluate the need and design for the other inputs required to generate the conditional alerts. So, for example, uh, if we have the severe weather warnings or conditions, then probably there'll be the Met Department. The Met Department gives the warning, so you need to check your understanding. Probably you get the news on the TV, but at the same time you would like to have the further details from your Met Department, or you would like to have further inputs from the fire brigade or from the law enforcement authorities like police. So in case of the potential risk, probably you prepare yourself, and then once you have these processes in place, then you carry out the intervention process, and then you need to develop the dashboard. So ideally your dashboard should be how many days you have worked in hardware house without any near miss or accident. All right. So these are the things. I mean, this is a typical example of the health and safety risk as far as the hardware houses department. Of course, it is applicable to all the other departments. It can be applicable to pharmacy. It can be applicable to supermarket. But of course, the other department have not obtained or opted for occupational health and safety certificate. That's ISO 45001. So auditor wouldn't like to check it because it is not in the scope of the audit. Now, from the processes, we come to the internal controls. So, the internal controls are basically is a process designed to provide the reasonable assurance regarding the achievements of the objective. So, the risk is basically, how do we define the risk? Risk is basically the uncertainty. It is the uncertainty factors with respect to the achievement of your business objectives. So in order to mitigate the risk, we need to define the internal controls. So internal control is basically the process in order to make sure that we have effective and efficient operations. We produce and we process and we decipher the accurate information, and we comply with the applicable statutory and regulatory requirements. So if you look into ISO 9000 or ISO 45001, this is how our understanding of the internal controls with respect to the management system looks like. So here we have on the top left, we have the company's functional departments within the management system. So it could be ISO 9001 2015 or ISO 45001 2018. So here we have the responsibility of the top management and the governance factor. We have the product or service realization. We have resource management, measurement, analysis, and improvement. So these are basically requirement of the standard. And then we have the control activities and the control environment. We'll come to what exactly is the control activities and control environment. And from the control environment, we have the information and communication. As you say that, again, so if you see the left side, so you have the requirement of the standard. From the requirement of the standard, you do the risk assessment. And from the risk assessment, you have the process of evaluation, planning, implementation, and reporting. So you generate the information. So when you generate the information, you communicate the information. So when you have the information, you can monitor your activities. Anything that needs to be monitored and controlled, you need to have the proper data. proper information about it. So, uh, I mean, uh, that's the difference between the data and information. For example, you go to a restaurant. I mean, if you own a restaurant, uh, you know, any person comes in and if he orders the sandwiches or he orders the coffee, that becomes a data. So you know that so many people have come, so many people have ordered coffee or sandwiches or burgers. But now when you collate the data and then you try to find out that what kind of footfall we have in the morning, what kind of footfall we have in the afternoon and evening, and then morning we have what is the demography. Do we get young people in the morning, or working professionals, or we get the retirees in the morning, and the afternoon who are the people? So we get the working people during the lunchtime, or we get we get the ladies, who are basically housewives, and when they are free would like to come and have chat with their friends in the coffee house. So when you collect the data, you get the specific information about it, and you can do something with that information. So you can plan out your various activities when you have analyze that particular information. Now all this, when you have the processes and procedures, you need to have your internal controls and the control environment, uh, with respect to your information, with respect to your key performance indicators, and it has to be well coordinated and communicated within the organization and outside the organization with the stakeholders. So there are key points we have to understand, that the people at every level of the organization affect the internal controls. So when we are talking about the internal controls, we are basically talking about people, processes, and technology. Because today, if you see that if we come to the organization, it is just not the people. It's not. I mean, we are not talking something like the agricultural society, where people used to go to the paddy fields, rice fields, and they used to have very preliminary tools, and whole day they used to work in the rice field and they used to go back home. Of course, they used to follow certain processes, but if you see today's, I mean, from the industrialization point of view, and then later on, right now, today, what is the environment? If you just take out the people, the technology is useless and the processes are useless. Same thing with the processes and same thing with the technology. So they are all, overlap each other. So when we and if you see, so if you see, from the quality philosophy point of view, there is what we call as a people school of quality, process school of quality, and technology school of quality. So what the process school of quality says is that if you define your processes and if you implement your processes the way you defined it, and if you control your processes, then you can produce quality, or you can produce results. The technology school of quality says that if you innovate the technology, if you have the latest technology, you can produce the quality. I mean, today we see this result everywhere, that because of technology, it is so much ease, and we can do it with the speed. But the third thing is a people school of quality. The people school of quality says that you have the best of the process, best of the technology. But if you don't have competent people, if you don't have motivated people, then the rest of the two factors, that is technology and processes, they are not going to work. So, when it comes to the internal controls, when it comes to the documented processes and system, it is everyone's responsibility. It is people's responsibility. It is your responsibility. So, one thing we have to understand, the effective internal controls help an organization achieve its own objective. So, we have seen the PDCA cycle: plan, do, check, act. So even in plan, do, check, act, we have the internal controls. And when we talk about the management processes, so what is the management? Management is about the planning, organizing, directing, and control. So, so we bring in PDCA, we bring in plan, organize, direct, and control. the internal controls will help us achieve the objectives because we have the prior understanding of what we are, where we are supposed to go, and how we can go there. So these are all factors are addressed in the internal controls. So again, the internal controls, you talk in terms of processes, you talk in terms of ISO 9000 or ISO 45000, you talk in terms of internal controls. We come to the same conclusion again and again. So here, we have to identify what is the control environment. Control environment is the soft factor. We'll come to it. The control activities. Control activities is those are our processes. How do we carry on our processes? Then we need to do the risk assessment for all our activities. So everything has to be risk based. So ISO standards are based on risk based thinking, which we have seen it last time. So the again, we have the objectives, but we cannot achieve the objectives because we have uncertainties. Our life is full of uncertainties, right? So how do we address those uncertainties? So in order to address that uncertainties, we have the proper risk assessment in place, risk management in place. And when we carry out our control activities, we generate certain data, we generate certain information, how that information is communicated effectively. Many times in the organization, the communication process are not properly tuned. There is a culture probably in the organization where the communication is not that open. Um, so in that case, people are aware of certain facts, but people, wouldn't like to discuss it openly or wouldn't like to divulge that particular information for whatever reason. But so if you don't have the proper and effective flow of information, then it's going to create an issue for you. And then finally, then we come to the monitoring. So again, if you look at this particular cycle here, again we come to the PDCA cycle. So plan, do, check, act. So the beauty of PDCA is that we can apply PDCA here, PDCA. We can apply PDCA here. We can apply PDCA here. We can apply PDCA here, and we can apply PDCA here. So the control environment is basically is the consciousness of the organization. So that is what I was talking about, the awareness. That is what I was talking about, the mindfulness. So it is the atmosphere in which people conduct their activities and carry out their controls responsibilities. So the more and more awareness you bring into the people, more the consciousness level is high. So that is what I call it as a problem consciousness. Problem consciousness is like, you your brain is not trained to identify the problems. Why people are progressing today? I mean, if you see all the apps been developed today, just take an example. Uh, 10 years back, 10 years ago, if somebody would have told me that, you will be standing on the middle of the road and with your mobile phone, you will be able to call the cab. 10 years back. I mean, 10 years back, we had a mobile phone, right? And 10 years back, we had these smartphones, but then nobody would have thought that with just a mobile phone at the middle of the road at any time, from nowhere you can call a taxi, or from nowhere you can call a transportation, or from nowhere you can call the food. So so that means the person or the people who have developed this app, they have identified the problem. So they had the problem consciousness. So suppose, I mean, that problem was there, isn't it? So many times you travel to another country, foreign country, uh, you are not sure whether you going to get the taxi, and especially like, I mean, I have that experience traveling to the colder countries when you get there, you don't have your taxi booked, and then when you can't go out in the open in the on from the airport because it's so cold, So uh, I mean, if you have the app, then even though you have not pre-booked your taxi, you can just land there, log on to the app, and you can call the taxi. That is so convenient. So that problem was there, but nobody has identified that problem. Nobody had the awareness of that problem. Nobody had the consciousness of the problem. And people, even though had the awareness of the problem, they chose not to do anything about that problem. So that is what, there is an old saying. It says that everyone talks about the weather, but no one does anything about it. So in the organization, if you see that everybody talks about, oh, we have this problem, oh, we have that problem, or I mean, we need to do something about this particular process, or we need to do something about this particular equipment or this particular function. So we just talk, but we don't do anything about it. So everybody talks about how it is raining heavily, but nobody brings the solution that fine, even if it's raining, we still have to do our activity. I have an umbrella or I have a raincoat. All right. So the consciousness, the awareness is very important. So the departmental heads, the human resources and the culture department plays very important role. That how do you bring in the awareness, the consciousness of the people as far as the control activity is concerned. So here I would like to stop, and I would like to have your feedback about the control environment and what are the challenges you face today as far as your organization is concerned. If you may would like to speak about it, or I think let's have a little chat rather than just typing it. So you can unmute your microphone, whoever would like to speak, and share with us about the control environment. Yes, please. I'm a little concerned about the silence, or you're just collecting your thoughts. HR department would like to speak about the environment. And what are the actions you have taken? Hello, are you there? All of you? Yes, no, maybe. Yes, I would like to ask about the awareness culture, about the internal controls, about the systems, about the processes in your organization, and how the human resources department or the departmental or the process owners take actions to increase the consciousness or the awareness about the processes and the system approach or the internal controls. That is my question.
Hi, Doctor.
Yes,
So like
please.
in our finance, in finance, we have the control procedure. So like time to time, we review our processes
Mhm.
that what we have written. that staff is following or not. And then time to time we check it and remind them that if anywhere they miss it, we remind them for that how to do that. So as per what our finance process is there, like our bank reconciliation process, our accounts payable process, account receivable process, we have that process. We follow that, and if anywhere we are missing, we are reminding the team that we are missing here, need to improve. So that process we are continuously doing in
Excellent.
our department.
Excellent. Very well. Anybody else would like to share with us? Chester. Very good. So, you have the temperature check for the all incoming customers, and you are still doing it. So that's good because that shows your concern for your customers. Yes. Right. So that's a consciousness. That is how you do the risk assessment, and that is how you bring the awareness about the people. Yeah. All right. Okay. So let's move on. So here let's look into the principles of effective internal controls. So as we know that we have the control environment. Control environment is about the awareness, is about the consciousness of the people. So here, the top management, the governance body would like to demonstrate the commitment to the integrity and ethical values. So you need to do business with the integrity and ethical values, and that is how it comes from the top management. That is, it comes from the governing body, so that everybody else in the organization, follow the ethical values. Exercise the oversight responsibilities. That is again the governing body, and the top management is going to do that. You need to establish the structure, authority, and responsibilities. So again, we come to ISO 9000 or ISO 45000. Demonstrate commitment to competence. So competent people should be competent. So again, we come back to the same people, process, and technology. So it's very important for us to have the competent people of the competent people in the organization. So if you have the new recruit, then you need to make sure just give me 1 minute, please. All right, sorry for the interruption. So when person joins the organization, HR department would like to tell me something about how do you handle the new recruit and how do you make sure that the person is competent to do his job. We are discussing the control environment. Yes, so we induction for new hires on company expectations, policy, vision, mission, value of the business. Lovely. But how do you make sure that he is competent? In what way you evaluate the competency, and in how do you make sure that the person is fit for the particular job?
Hello, Dr. Sandip.
Yes, please.
All right. It's Sonia here. So from people and culture, the competency level is assessed at the interview stage when we start the recruitment. Yeah. So the person is assessed, the assessment is done at the recruitment stage where the person is interviewed, depending on the type recruitment method that we carry out. I'll give an example. So recently we hired graduates for Stop and Shop for our retail management program. The recruitment method that we carried out was through an assessment center where we created a controlled environment. It was a simulated environment where certain behaviors were to be assessed by the assessors. And those behaviors were, if given in a real scenario in Stop and Shop, how would the person respond? Yeah. So in terms of communication skills, problem solving, critical thinking, all those areas, the competencies which we require at the store level for a person who's going to be employed for a management role, like as a grad, and to be groomed to be groomed into a management role. So those are the competency areas, the skills that we assessed in the controlled environment. So at the recruitment stage is when we assess whether the person has the values or has the qualities for our business. And also culture is one thing. If they would be suitable for our culture, if they are the perfect culture fit for our organization. Yeah.
That's lovely. So after the person is inducted, then what is the next step? I mean, then you have sort of an induction training.
Yes, correct. So when we do the selection, we make the offer, and they accept it. We take them through the induction stage before they actually commence employment. And the induction takes them through the company's, what CPL is about, the history, who are our board of directors, the SLT team, introduce them to the SLT team, and also the expectations of the business towards the employee. And then so it's in there that the employee makes that decision. Okay, what's in it for me with the business? Or we gauge their heart and mind in the induction. And that's where the induction stage is where the employee actually makes the decision whether they will stay, or I mean, there's something in it for me, or I will continue with the business, or I'll go. Yeah. So the company policies are highlighted also. The main areas are highlighted in the induction as well. And so the employee is expected to align with the values, expectations of the business and the company policies as well in the induction stage. And then the employee is also made to feel that they are valuable to the business, because we believe that we make the right decision to bring that person into the business. And so their value that they bring is also important to the growth of the business. So that's what we do in the induction. It's the onboarding stage.
Okay, and how do you manage the performance reviews?
The performance review. So and also, yes, the performance management cycle is also, the employee is taken through the performance management cycle in the induction, at the induction stage. So the performance management cycle is managed between people and culture team, the employee, and the manager. Yeah. So
and at that point of time, do you identify any new training requirements or something like that?
yes, correct.
Okay.
It's
Alright.
at the end of the year, when the end of year review is done. Then the manager and the employee sit down and they assess whatever goals they have set at the beginning of the year or mid-year, and see where the employee has come in their performance. And then if they are seen as high performance, they are recommended for training. If they are low performers and they have areas to improve on, then recommendation is done to put them on a performance improvement plan. That's a PIP. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so that's on the dot. So you have the control environment, and then we have the risk assessment. So specifies the suitable objectives, identify and analyze risk, assess the fraud risk. Now the fraud is not part of ISO 9000, but still, since we are talking about the internal controls, so we are talking about the fraud risk assessment. And the identify and analyze the significant change as far as the process, people, and technology is concerned. And then you have the control activities. The control activities, select and develop control activities in terms of processes and procedures. Select and develop general controls over the technology, because nowadays most of the processes are carried over the technology, because the technology is a facilitator. Technology provides us tools to carry on these processes effectively. And throughout the organization, we have to make sure that the policies and procedures have been deployed properly. People have been trained for it, and people follow the policies and procedures consistent manner. All right, so yes, Sophie says that it includes elements such as management, integrity, ethical value, operating philosophy, and commitment to the organizational competence. An environment in which competent people understand their responsibilities, the limits of their authority, and are knowledgeable, mindful, and committed to doing what is right and doing it the right way. Excellent way of expressing it. Then we come to the information and communication. So we need to use, again, I'll like to map it to the ISO 9000 or ISO 45000 standard. So it's very important that what you are going to communicate, who's going to communicate, to whom, with whom you are going to communicate, how you are going to communicate. Now all that needs to be addressed in the controls, in the documented processes and procedures. And finally, we come to the monitoring activities. So we need to have the online evaluations and reviews, and we need to identify the gap areas. We need to identify the deficiencies. We need to identify the non-conformities, and then we have to make sure that whenever we identify the deficiency and gap areas or non-conformities, we do the root cause analysis, RCA, and then come to the suitable resolution and to find out the problems. And that is how we go towards the continual improvement spiral. So if you see here that again, we come back to the PDCA cycle, your plan, do, check, act. So yes, we have, this is what the Sophie Ems has said, that the effective control environment is about where the competent people understand their responsibility, understand the limits of that authority. They are knowledgeable, mindful. They are committed to doing what is right and doing it the right way. And the control environment is greatly influenced by the extent to which individuals recognize that they will be held accountable. So this is what is very important for us to understand. So the control environment is about the management philosophy and the operating style, how they are supportive. Do they demonstrate the supportive attitude towards the control, the organization structure, that is about the clear lines of accountability. Then you have the audit committee, the internal audit committee, who would monitor the control structure. You have personnel policies and procedures, so people properly match with the task. The communication of authorities and responsibilities about the performance reporting, the meetings, the conferences as effective communication devices. And then finally, the internal audit. So internal audit is internal audit is about identifying the issues, identifying the problems, identifying the risk, and to the certain extent, the internal audit department also acts as a internal management consultants to the top management. So that is how they suggest the solutions. So the integrity and the ethical value, I don't have to say again, but then it is about the formal code of conduct and the policy communicating the appropriate ethical and moral behavior standards and addressing the acceptable interest of the people. There should not be any conflict of interest. And management appropriately addresses the intervention or overriding internal control. The commitment to the competence, as you know, that there has to be a formal job description. So there has to be a proper training need analysis. And from the training need analysis, you should be able to identify that in order to enhance the competence of the people, what training needs to be given. So again, the training cycle, training management, so learning and development. So all that part is taken as far as the competence and enhancement is concerned. The management philosophy and operating style, again, it's the appropriate uh, attitude towards the risk taking. So again, here we talk about the risk capacity, risk appetite, and risk tolerance. So how the management looks at it, and every management probably looks at it in a different way, in a different context. Then the top management should always endorse the use of performance-based management. So it should not be about, uh, I mean, about the whether you like someone or whether you don't like someone. It is should be purely based on the performance. So there should not be an excessive personnel turnover. So if there is any, if the attrition rate is high, then that means that there is something probably we need to take the corrective action. The organization structure, make sure that your organization structure is properly documented. So you have the organization chart. You have to make sure that the authorities and responsibilities are properly defined and communicated throughout the organization, and you have the clear reporting relationship. So that is again, it's a part of ISO standardization. Again, it's part of internal controls. The human resources policies and practices, if you remember well, last year we created the entire manual for you for the human resources management. I don't know whether you have done the improvements or major changes in that. So, how the policies and procedures with related to hiring, providing the orientation to the new recruits, training them, evaluating them, counseling them, promoting them, compensating them, disciplinary actions, and terminating the employee. So, right, the entire employee life cycle should be addressed as far as human resources policies and practices are concerned. Then the oversight group is about your internal audit team. Here, I would like to invite your internal people from your internal audit department and would like to check, how do they provide the oversight? How do they provide the internal audit, uh, internal audit interventions or the services to all the other department? How do they do that? And what are the success factors which they have identified? Yeah, over to the internal audit department, people from internal audit department. What you do basically, internal audit. Please go ahead. Please share with us.
So basically what we do as the internal audit department, we after the end of a year, we actually do a risk assessment on areas or departments that we actually audited. So after going through the risk assessment, we identify areas in the organization where we look into. So after identifying the areas, we actually have them in our annual audit plan, and the annual audit plan is then sent out to the management for approval. So once the
Yes, Brendan, yes. All right, so again, yes, I got it, thank you. So again, the risk assessment, again, identify risk to the achievement of organization objectives, take necessary mitigation actions to manage those risks, and thus set goals and objectives for the internal controls. Now coming to the organizational objectives, there has to be the operational objectives, financial reporting objectives, and compliance objectives. So in ISO management system certification audit, the auditor is not going to look at the financial reporting objectives. The auditor is going to look at the operational objectives and the compliance objectives. So whether you adhere to the applicable laws, statutory and regulatory requirements, that is auditor is going to check. The auditor is going to check about your the effectiveness and efficiency of your operations, your core processes and your supporting processes. So, again, risk assessment is nothing but the identification and analysis of risk associated with the achievement of the operational, financial reporting and compliance goals and objectives. So this is about determining how the risk needs to be managed. Risk cannot be totally eliminated, but then they'll be there. So how do we develop the risk-based thinking? So you will have to understand that risk assessment and risk management is not the exclusive or the sole responsibility of the internal audit department. Risk assessment and risk management is a responsibility of each process owner. So you being in the HR department, you being in the facility department, you being into customer support department, you being into facility management department, you come from any department, you need to understand that how do I identify the risk in my processes in my particular department. So basically, you need to ask yourself these questions that, what I'm doing now, what could go wrong, how would I fail, what must go right for us to succeed. So what are our vulnerabilities? Where are our weak points? What are our soft points which could be targeted by the internal factors or the external factors? What are the assets we need to protect? So assets in terms of processes, assets in terms of people, assets in terms of technology, asset in terms of customers, asset in terms of information. What do we need to protect? And what the liquid assets? Liquid. So that's again part of financial part, but as a process owner, you need to understand that how do I make my process, my department profit oriented? So it should be a profit center and not the cost center. And how could someone steal from your department? So basically, you being into retail business, the stealing could be from the external sources or the internal sources. So you need to identify those the sources where there could the stealing place. I mean, shoplifting is not uncommon. So that you need to take care of it. All right. So how could someone disrupt our operations? How do we know whether we are achieving our objectives? On what information do we mostly rely upon? Or what do we spend the most money on? Where do we spend? What are our expenses? How do we collect our bills and how do we collect our revenue? So what decision require the most judgment? So decisions should be based on information and data. It cannot be simply based on whims and fancies. What are the activities which we conduct are the simple activities and the complex activities? And what activities require proper monitoring and measurement? What activities are under legal regulations? And what is our greatest legal exposure? So that means if you follow this, if we don't follow that, then there could be heavy penalties on us. So that we need to check. So that is what we normally ask the questions in the risk analysis. And then from the risk, we need to identify what is the qualitative cost and the quantitative cost. So as far as the quantitative cost is concerned, it could cost to a property or equipment or inventory or cash dollar loss or damage or the repair cost or cost of defending the lawsuit. And the qualitative cost could be loss of public trust, violation of laws, a default on a project or a bad publicity. So these are the things which we need to address. So you need to have the formal process to analyze the risk. In fact, in ISO 9000, we have given you the formal procedure that how do you analyze the risk. And if you follow that risk, then you have the criteria for the risk determination. So whether you have the low risk or medium risk or the high risk. So in case your risk is medium and high, then that requires the priority. And the appropriate level of management and employees are involved in the risk analysis. So risk analysis cannot be done in isolation. Risk analysis is always a team exercise. So risk needs to be identified and analyzed are relevant to the corresponding activity objective. So as you know that the risk is about the uncertainties or the events which could affect the or which could keep us away from achieving our business objectives and the targets. So you need to manage the risks during the change. So if you are hiring a new people for the key positions, if you are introducing the new or change information system, that means if there are any changes to your ERP, if there are any changes to your software, you know to do that. If you are doing a rapid growth or there is a growth or expansion, or rapidly you are downsizing a particular operation, then you need to do the risk analysis. You need to do the risk analysis in terms of production or a provision of new outputs of services. And as and when you establish the new operations in the new geographical area, you need to do the risk. So these are the changes where you need to particularly focus on your risk activities. Then now we can come to the control activities. So these are basically the control activities are supported by the policies and procedures which we carry out. If they carry out properly and timely manner, then we can manage or reduce the risk. So we have basically three types of controls. We have preventive controls, detective controls, and corrective controls. Let's look into this. So some of the control activities could be the approval, authorization, and verification. These are the preventive controls. Reconciliations, these are detective controls. Review of performance, again, it is a detective control. Security of assets is a preventive and detective controls. Segregation of duties is again a preventive control, and control over information system is a preventive and detective control. So these are the control activities. So for the approvals, you need to have written policies and procedures. You need to have the limits to authority, supporting documentation. You need to question unusual activities or items. I mean, you don't have the rubber stamp, attitude. I mean, someone comes to your approval, you just put your rubber stamp on that without asking questions. It's not a good sign of, having a proper internal controls. And you could not sign blank forms. Whenever the information comes to you, you need to go through that information. You need to analyze that information, and then only the approval needs to be granted. All right, so reconciliation, it's an accounting part, not part of the ISO part. The reviews, the management reviews in terms of your performance indicators, unexpected results and unusual items is very important. Again, it's a part of ISO 9000. The segregation of duties. So no one person should initiate transaction, approve the transaction, record the transaction, reconcile balances, handle assets and review reports. So at least we need to have two sets of eyes, so same person, you cannot audit your own department. You cannot check your own activities. That is what again ISO is saying, that you have to have, you have to manage the conflict of interest. You need to manage the impartiality. So you need to make sure that so maker and checker. So person who is doing that activity is different from the person who is checking that activity. So maker checker relationship needs to be established. So again, the information generation, the information analysis, very important related to the organization's objectives, including the related to the critical success factors. The information is identified and captured in a timely manner. It is distributed to the right people at the right time with sufficient detail and sufficient forms, so that they can carry out their duties and responsibilities effectively and efficiently. So what could be the forms and means of communication? So you need to have your communication channels properly managed in terms of your policies and procedure manuals, in terms of your management directives, in terms of your memorandums, in terms of your bulletins and board notices, in terms of your internet and website, in terms of your WhatsApp messages, videotape messages, emails and speeches, your training programs, all these forms and means and communications should be managed. And then we come to the monitoring activities. So our quality of performance over the time to ensure that the findings of audits and the management reviews are properly revised. So you will have to understand that if you're doing all these activities properly all the time in a right manner, then you are already following ISO 9000 or ISO 45000. And the ongoing monitoring is very important. So you cannot do a monitoring is once in a month or once in a 15 days or at the end of the week. So this is where the problem consciousness come to the picture. So here, as and when the activity is being carried out, you need to have the routine feedback. So this is where, in the last lecture, we have seen the feedback loop about the system. So system has to be open and not the closed. That means system should be able to check the feedback from this environment, try to find out what is and where it is going wrong, how it is going wrong, and what corrective actions we need to take. So that is about the monitoring. Again, you see the PDCA cycle here: plan, do, check, act. The communication from the external parties, the external stakeholders, should be corroborated with your internally generated data and information, and should indicate the problems with the internal controls. So the ISO auditors can point out the the issues as far as your internal controls or internal processes are concerned. And data recorded by information and financial systems are periodically compared with the physical assets, and discrepancies are examined. So in terms of physical assets, in terms of processes, in terms of people, all that data needs to be collated and collaborated. So the control procedures are, about the job descriptions, about the training programs, about the hiring of the policies. So they are going to enhance the competence of people. Then the policies and procedures manual, you must adhere to the policies and procedures all the time. And if there is any deviation required, which could be exception, then you have to follow the exception management procedure or a deviation procedure. Planning, budgeting, and the performance monitoring in terms of your short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals and plans, and how do you monitor and take suitable corrective action. You need to safeguard your assets in terms of your asset management. Make sure that there is a limited access to the assets, that people who are supposed to require that asset and use that asset, only those they need to have access to that asset or information. You need to have the periodic inventories, cash counts, and security counts as far as your access and accountability controls are concerned, because I'm more particular about it because you are into retail business. All right, so now how do you normally prepare for a surveillance audit? So prepare your employees. So prepare your employees in that make sure that you review the quality policy. If you need to refresh it, you please refresh it. Uh, your people, your employees, your workers, they need not memorize the policy, but they should know what is the gist of it. All right. So what is the management's commitment in terms of quality or in terms of occupational health and safety? Uh, then people should know about the quality objectives. People should know about the performance objectives. People should know about the performance criterias. People should know about their key performance indicators. Train people properly. I mean, you don't leave any gap areas where people are not trained. The training need analysis has not been done. Training has not been provided. Make sure that you have the documented information. That means in terms of processes, procedures, standard operating procedures, work instructions, forms, records. In terms of your ERP is properly managed. Let everyone know what is going to be the scope of the audit, who's going to audit, when the auditor is going to check it, and how the auditor is going to do that activities. And if the employees, if the people, if the process and owners are not competent, then you make sure that you conduct the mock interviews, because you don't want to cut the sorry figure in front of the auditor where the person says, I don't know about this particular thing. So that should not happen. All right, so you review your documented information. So make sure all your documents and records are up to date. Make sure that all your documents are reviewed, they are approved, they are communicated and followed by everyone involved in the process or activity. There are no obsolete documents. Make sure that they have been removed from the circulation and they are no longer in use. And make sure that whatever records are there, they have been used correctly. So this is what you are supposed to do. Review the corrective action process. So in case if there are audit findings in terms of internal audit or in terms of external audit, review the audit findings and make sure that they have been addressed properly. So there are no non-conformities. If there are any non-conformities, then they are properly recorded, investigated. So root cause analysis been done and actions been taken so that all the non-conformities are closed. There are no corrective action pending. Make sure that your workplace is organized. So make sure that everything is spick and span. All the proper cleanliness is maintained. All the records, all the files, all the materials management, transportation, everything as if it runs in a proper manner. Auditor doesn't would like to see a disorganized workplace. So when the auditor sees the disorganized workplace, that means that reveals the awareness level of the people, the consciousness of the people. So the primary impression of the auditor is not good, because auditor thinks that if the workplace is not properly organized, if it is not clean, then I doubt whether this person would have the consciousness level, the awareness level to operate the processes and the internal controls. I mean, that awareness level may be absent, and that's why. And the first indicator of it is the disorganized and unclean workplace. So make sure that everything is spick and span. Practice positivity and professionalism. So always make a good first impression and treat auditors professionally and with respect. So auditor, remember, auditor is doing his job. Auditor is there to find out if there are any gap areas in your system. Auditor is going to find out if there are any risk which you have not identified and addressed properly. Auditor is going to find out what are the opportunities for improvement. So auditor is not coming with the attitude of trying to catch you by your neck. Auditor is coming with the attitude to find out what way you can positively change your work environment, in what way you can improve your work environment, in what way you can improve your processes and systems. So try to make good impression and try to help your auditor. Do not be predisposed. Auditors are not your enemies. That is what I've said, that auditors are your friends. All right. I mean, earlier we had very negative impressions about the auditors. Maybe, few auditors used to be like that they used to approach the audit like inspectors, or like Sherlock Holmes, or like detectives, or like police. No, that is not the auditor is supposed to do. Auditor is your friend. Auditor is supposed to help you find out the gap areas, the risk areas, and the auditor is there to help you find out the opportunities for improvement in your work areas, right? He is going to help you discover the weaknesses in your system and to take the necessary action. So these are the things, these are the preparations which you are supposed to do for your upcoming surveillance audit. The training program, this session is also being attended by Shailesh. As you know, Shailesh, many of you probably would know him. He has helped you, during your previous assessment. So he is going to be there to help you out. In case you require any assistance, you can contact him directly. You have his email ID, shailesh.ferreira@issomantra.com. So he's there to help you out in case you require my help. Even I'm there to support you anytime. So with this, we have concluded this training for the how do you survive the surveillance audit. Now I would like to ask, if you have any queries, any doubts, any questions, and how we are going to address them. All right, so it's over to you now. Any questions? I mean, don't think whether it is right question or whether it is stupid questions and all. All those are don't think about that. Just ask whatever you feel like, which is going to help you improve your performance, improve your processes, improve your system. It's going to help you, face the audit. We are there to help you out. Yes, please. Any doubts, any queries, any questions, or is everything is clear? Yes, no, maybe. Yes, what if the audit client is not honest? That is what about professionalism. I mean, if it is not honest, the auditor, then it makes a job of auditor little difficult. Now, auditor has to be really diplomatic in the sense that the auditor has to point out to the auditee that without hurting his sentiment, without coming across as he's accusing, he has to point out in a very professional way that this is the information he's looking for, and he's finding it difficult from the auditee perspective or audit client that he's not getting that information. So maybe he can give some time to the audit client or auditee and ask him that this is what I'm looking for, this is the information, this is the data I'm looking for. So you would be most interested in that information. These are what we call as an audit client or auditee misconduct. So but then you need to handle it very professionally, without losing your cool, without losing your own, what I would say, a gait and your posture, and make sure that, and that is where, I mean, you can use that, I call it as a broken record technique. So, in earlier days, we used to have those, the LP record, which we used to play these songs. So if any particular track is broken, then the record used to move on the same particular track again and again. So auditor, should use this broken record technique. Is that, what you're saying is very interesting, but fine. I would like to have this particular information. So what you are saying is very interesting, but fine, I would like to have this particular information. So without losing gait, without losing posture, without losing patience, the auditor has to make sure that he communicates to the auditee that I'm here to do the value addition to your system, and for that I require this particular information. So this is how I would like to approach it, Brendan. Do you have any? Do you have a different take on this? Yes, other people, Vincent, Vikas, Jenny. Any questions? Any doubts? So if you have got both the trainings clearly, please type yes in the chat box. Okay, so Sophie is asking, please explain on the BOSS, business operating system. So business operating system can be your software, the ERP which you are running, or the accounting software you are running, or the retail management, or point of sale software which you're running, or any automation, any application, any web-based application, any policies, any procedures, any standard operating processes or procedures, work instructions, all those termed as a business operating system, BOSS. And of course, the BOSS also includes three: people, processes, and technology. So all that encompasses the BOSS, business operating system. Business operating system also includes the standardization like ISO 9000, ISO 45000, so on and so forth. So it's a very generic term that what is the system we deploy to manage our business or operate our business. All right, so we have yes from Sonia, yes from Vikas, yes from Brendan. Rest of the people, I would like to have a specific feedback from you. Yeah, all right. So, Sophie, okay, thank you. So with this, we would like to conclude this session here. And I will make sure that the recording of today's session is also available to you. So it takes time to download this recording and then upload it on the YouTube. And then once we have uploaded on the YouTube, I'm going to share the link with you. So with this, thank you very much. And I would like to wish you all the best for the upcoming surveillance audit. Make sure that you are connected with Shailesh Ferreira, and in case any support is required, he's going to provide you that. So thank you very much and have a good day. Thank you very much. All the best.